All right, we're here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live, wherever you might be joining us. Thank you so much for making us part of your Friday. Josh Doring is here with me. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live, on Twitter, on Periscope, or pretty much everywhere. It's a Friday. We made it. Like I said, Josh Doring is here with me. Josh, how you doing?
Doing all right. Ready for the weekend. It's going to be a good weekend of sports. And I must say, I was very, very appreciative of your tweet last night. I really was.
Which one? I tweeted quite a bit. Which one are you talking about?
The one where you very accurately stated that every time there's a collision near the basket, it's not a charge. And I that quote tweeted and said, I also appreciate Jay Billis, who talks about this every broadcast and will not stop. It's bad.
It's horrible. I'm going to foreshadow a little bit here. I've got more to say about this in the last segment of the first hour. So I would like to keep some of my thoughts under wrap for humor me, please, if you don't mind. But it's horrible. It really is. It really is horrible. As for this weekend, this is the first weekend in a while that I've really wished that social distancing and not going to bars wasn't a thing. I'd love to just spend all day at a Buffalo Wild Wings or somewhere just watching all the sports that are happening, because as we were talking about before we actually hit the go button this morning, our beloved Butler Bulldogs play at 11:30 on Saturday morning, but there are 22 other games that start right then, including the Big Ten championship game. That is I got to pay attention to those. I'm sorry. And you've got the top three teams in college basketball playing on at the same time as the Big Ten title game. So all of a sudden Butler falls all the way down the list. But if you're surrounded by 4, 5, 6 TVs and you can watch all of them at the same time, then let's get it popping. But it's the first weekend that I was like, man, this is a good weekend to be out and about in terms of the sports that are going to happen. But we'll get to a lot of it today. We'll start the show here with some Thursday night football and Texas Tech, Kansas. Then we're going to play a game. I'm going to throw some college football playoff scenarios at Josh. If Team X beats Team Y, if Team C beats Team B, and these other two things happen, who's in your college football playoff, that kind of thing. I've got 4 different scenarios that we'll go back and forth on. And humor me, please, in the first hour. We'll get Chris Brown on the call for the second hour, do the podium, the final 5, and what are you watching this weekend? Mr. Doring. So I've been trying to put my finger on why I can't fully commit to Baylor being the team that's going to win the Big 12 regular season, because most of what I've seen would suggest that Baylor's the far more talented basketball team, right now the better basketball team, and in theory should win the Big 12, and that seems to, at least largely around the country, and yesterday on this show I even leaned towards Baylor. What happened last night in Lubbock is why I can't completely disconnect myself from Kansas, because it almost doesn't seem to matter how poorly Kansas plays in Big 12 games or how bad their stretches are. They didn't score a point for the first 7 minutes of the second half, but they always are in the game. They always take a punch and return a punch, and they always seem to. I can't remember the last time I watched Kansas get blown out in a Big 12 game, and they find ways to win games on the road against top 15 opponents like Texas Tech, despite not playing well and Ochai Agbaji being the only guy to score more than 10 points and not shooting it well, but playing good defense and then finding a way to win in the last minute. I think it was a perfect example as to why, even if Baylor on paper and from the eye test so far has been the better basketball team, that even though I might have leaned towards Baylor yesterday, I still don't feel horrible about the idea of Kansas being the Big 12 title regular season champ, or at least sharing it, because they go into Big 12 games and they win games like the one last night when they're on the road. They don't play well. It's a top 25 team, but they still find a way to win it.
It really was a perfect, and you were you were texting me about this midway through the second half. It really was a perfect encapsulation of why it is so difficult for anybody else to win the Big 12 because they do this every season. And like you said, the only blowout I can think of is the beatdown that Baylor gave them the first time last season.
Sure. Yeah.
But they came back and won the second one.
Yep. Exactly.
That's right. That's the only one. Iowa State's had some barrages from 3 where they win by 12 or something, but you never felt like Kansas was completely out of those games.
Right.
They're excellent at just hanging around. And you also look at some of the difference makers, and the two stats that stand out to me. They shot 93% from the free throw line.
Mm-hmm.
Texas Tech shot 61, and they won the rebounding battle 36-29.
Yeah.
It wasn't a great performance. There were good moments and bad moments from Texas Tech as well. Terrence Shannon was really good. Mac McClung
was very Mac McClung.
He's been giving liberty and freedom that I don't think we necessarily expected.
Yeah.
They're good. But this is also part of why there's a clear top tier and a tier 2 in the Big 12 for me. If that's their ceiling, if they can't win that one, they've got no hope of winning this conference.
Sure.
Because Kansas is going to play better than that. You got to hit your free throws.
Mm-hmm.
You got to rebound. You got to just do the fundamental things that Kansas always does, and that Baylor generally is pretty good at. But that was my sort of takeaway as well. And we've talked about this before, but I've been quietly impressed with this Kansas team so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's more, I think, that highly of Baylor than it is I'm concerned about Kansas at this point.
Sure.
I'm still skeptical they're a Final Four caliber team, but at this point there are about 2 Final Four caliber teams, in my opinion, with the way everybody's playing. So they're pretty high up on my list of teams I would pick to make the Final Four, based on what we've seen so far. But if you want to win this conference and you're given an opportunity like that, and you go on that run in the second half to get control of the game back, because there was a moment where it looked like Kansas was going to start to build a lead and sort of coast, and Texas Tech came out and made sure that didn't happen. So now you're playing this one possession game back and forth at the end, and it's Kansas that makes the plays.
I mean, it was
unsurprisingly
right. It was super ugly, but with exactly 10 minutes left, Micah Peavy, who Jay Billis was all over Micah Peavy, and he's very good. But with exactly 10 minutes left, Micah Peavy made a shot to put Texas Tech up 46-39. And then after that, right, the final score was only 58-57. So in the last 10 minutes, Texas Tech only scored 11 points, which is certainly a testament, because I've never had doubts about Kansas's defense. It's just getting enough on offense from them. And Agbaji I'd been disappointed in at times this year, and he really stepped up in this game, a game that Jalen Wilson struggled for really the first time this season. Let me ask you a question. If I drop Baylor down by 7 in Lubbock with 10 minutes left, are you betting on Baylor to win that game? Let me add more. I probably wouldn't bet on Kansas to win the game either. My point is just that this is what Kansas does in the Big 12, and this is part of why they're so hard to beat. And they just have... Right, Baylor's been playing in the Big 12 for just as long as Kansas has. But I just feel like Kansas has more of that. But Kansas has also been hanging around the top of the Big 12 a whole lot longer than Baylor's been hanging around the top of the Big 12. And they understand, they have experience coming back and winning games like this. And these are the type of games that, like, when you're looking at places to differentiate teams, it's, okay, Kansas gets to play Texas at home, and what if Baylor doesn't find a way to make up that game, or it gets postponed again when it gets rescheduled, whatever. And then, Baylor also struggles to shoot the ball against Texas Tech, and they're down by 7 with 10 minutes left too. Is that a game that they come back and win? So that's the context. But what do you think? Do you have faith in Baylor to come back the way that Kansas did? Because that's part of winning a conference like this.
Mm-hmm. I would have probably said no before this game, but seeing the way that Texas Tech struggled down the stretch,
sure,
I feel better with that new data point that we saw last night.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of this too that I couldn't help but wonder is how does that play out if it's a fully packed crowd? And
Sure.
everybody's dealing with it. It is what it is.
But
It's not like
that's the loudest building I've heard of this season. 100%.
right. And they right. So they got 3,000 people or whatever it was in there. There was an impact.
Mm-hmm.
That's indisputable.
But it's still a fair question.
That's also the flip side of it too, though, is if they didn't have 3,000 fans in there, we're not going to know the answers to these questions, right. But there's part of this that I almost feel like plays into Baylor's hands as an experienced team without having to deal with as much pressure on the road this season.
Sure. Because
there are just some realities that, right, if you look at that game on your schedule in a normal world, that loss doesn't hurt you in terms of winning the Big 12. Mm-hmm. That's one of those games where if you're going to have 4 or 5 losses, that's probably one of them. It's just right. It's that second tier team on the road in a hostile environment.
Yeah.
But now it's a tough spot for Baylor because as you pointed out, now you're looking at this thing. You've already got a game postponed, and you just saw Kansas have probably what is going to be one of their poorer games against a high quality opponent and still find a way to come out on top on the road. Mm-hmm. It's a testament to what Kansas does.
It was right, because I've been pretty consistent in defending my original prediction that Kansas would win the Big 12, despite how good Baylor has looked at times this season, and specifically in the second half against Illinois, and clearly they're capable of doing it. And apart from the Gonzaga game, where Kansas showed like when they shoot the ball well, they can. I mean, losing by only 12 to Gonzaga when they put up 102 points means that there's at least some sort of offensive firepower there. Apart from that, right, they struggle against a Kentucky team, excuse me, that's right. It wasn't hard to understand why they struggled. They just didn't do great with Kentucky's athleticism and length, and that's part of why that game was so close. So apart from the first game of the season, I was searching more for at least something else to hang my hat on, and this game was certainly something else to hang my hat on. Let me be clear, like in this particular game, Kansas wasn't super impressive, but like you said, I feel like this is towards the bottom of their list of performances when we talk about their body of work in the Big 12 as a whole. Like I said, this is a perfect example as to why Bill Self and Kansas are better at winning their conference than any other team in the country is at winning their conference, because they win games like this, and they always get it back at home if they lose to a team on the road, and they never lose 2 in a row. Like almost ever. They never lose 2 in a row in the Big 12. They never compound losses. And so Baylor is going to, if nothing else, Baylor's going to have to perform really, really, really well to beat Kansas in the Big 12 and actually have the outright regular season title.
And they're going to have to win at least one of those head-to-heads.
Yep. I find it hard to believe either team is able to win the Big 12 if they go 0-2 against the other, whether that's Baylor or Kansas. So I guess quietly is not the right word, but I never considered Justin Herbert to be putting together an all-time level rookie season. But like in terms of record books, Justin Herbert threw for his 7th 300-yard game and tied Baker Mayfield for the most touchdowns that a rookie's ever had in a game that the Chargers managed to win in overtime, the Raiders losing Derek Carr in the first quarter. It was at times just not a pretty football game, and everybody on the field just looked like they weren't very good at their job at times. But when I was reading some of and hearing from on the broadcast and reading about the fact that like Herbert, like very few people have had a better rookie season at quarterback than Justin Herbert. And I also didn't feel like Baker Mayfield was on his way to being a really great quarterback when he did what he did in his rookie season. It's just an interesting conversation about how this doesn't change how I feel about Justin Herbert, but at the same time, he's been, relative to other performances as rookies, he's been impressive, but not to impressive to the point that I feel like, oh, we've got something really big time here in Justin Herbert. He's just exciting at times, can sling it around, and can put these kind of numbers up. But right, it's funny to see a guy put up numbers like this, historically speaking, and I just feel very normal about him and his future in the NFL. He should be a quarterback in the NFL for a long time, but I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where we're talking about Justin Herbert being the best quarterback in the NFL or even anywhere close to the best quarterback in the NFL. But it was making me laugh that those two things were coexisting at the same time.
And the fact that it was Baker Mayfield who holds that record, to me, is why I've been very impressed with Herbert. Really impressed last night. Mm-hmm. He's been really good. There's no disputing that. There's just so much that can change from year 1 to year 4 that I'm very quickly, not because of Herbert in particular, but because of you look at some of these other quarterbacks who are now sort of in that spot, particularly Carson Wentz. Mm-hmm. Lamar Jackson to a certain extent, although I think he's gotten unfair criticism. It's just so hard to know what a guy's going to look like in year 5 mm-hmm. based on year 1.
Sure.
But we're in year 1. He's been really good. And I really think that this win means something. It doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of this season. They're already, obviously they got 9 losses. They're not finishing at 500 even. Mm-hmm. But I like this roster, and you've got to like Herbert at this point going into next season with the way he's performed. It's about that process of winning that I'll consistently harp on. Mm-hmm. This game they have lost time and time and time again, and they managed to win it this time.
Mm-hmm. Against a Derek Carless Las Vegas Raiders, that is.
Mariota was pretty good, though.
Mariota was way better than... Like, I had forgotten that Mariota was still an NFL quarterback somewhere. Not only is he a Raider, like, he was respectable.
And when you're talking about backup quarterbacks, right, you just sort of forget that he's there, but he's the best backup in the league. Or at least 2 or 3.
Probably. You're disrespecting Taysom Hill. I'm just kidding.
I would argue he's still one of the best 30 quarterbacks on the planet.
He could probably start in Jacksonville.
Oh, he's absolutely right. He's better than the Jaguars starting quarterbacks.
He's probably better than Sam Darnold right now, too.
He's 28, 29, 30, 31.
Right.
He's somewhere in there.
Right.
He's not the franchise guy that the Titans hoped he would be, but he's still good. He wasn't bad.
No, that's Ryan Tannehill, which is even funnier.
It was just one of those things where, do you really feel like you can invest the second contract in him? Mm-hmm. Probably not.
Probably not.
Right. He's not that guy that you're gonna go lock up and say that's our quarterback for ideally 8-10 years, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. But he was hurt. There are concerns, and there's a reason he's a backup now. But he's still a very good player. Mm. And I liked the idea of kicking the field goal on 4th and 5. I agree with John Gruden's thinking there that if it's a shorter distance, you go for it. Mm. But 5 yards is a long way. And especially because you've taken that much time off the clock. There was plenty of time for the Chargers, but they also had to have somewhat of a sense of urgency to get the ball moving if they were going to get into at least get a tie or get into the end zone. Mm-hmm. You can look at Carr going out, some of the interception at the end, mm-hmm. but one team Justin Herbert delivered for the second week in a row. You got to give him credit. If he can keep this thing going up and now they're starting to win, I really like where they're going when you start looking ahead to next season. And it's unfortunate it ended this way for the Raiders, but yeah, bye-bye playoff hopes.
I will say, you said this yesterday on this show, that it's never been about talent for the Chargers. And yesterday they tried really hard to lose this game, despite the Raiders not having Derek Carr. And nobody that fancies themselves a respectable football team should struggle with the Raiders without Derek Carr. I know Mariota was good, but the Raiders' run defense is horrible. They're inconsistent on the offensive end, even with Derek Carr. The point being is that, like, when Derek Carr goes out, the Chargers should be licking their chops and winning this game by 21. And they just never do. They're just never that convincing, which is fine. I've also realized why the rookie bar in terms of historically good seasons for a rookie isn't that high. None of the best quarterbacks in the NFL start their rookie year.
Yep.
I mean, Peyton Manning did, but like Brady didn't, Mahomes didn't, Breeze didn't, Rodgers didn't. So the point being is that, I mean, I'm not here to make a declaration on what's sitting behind. Lamar Jackson didn't. Yeah, I'm not sitting here making a revelation about what it means to not start your rookie year at quarterback. But I also am here to say that not starting your rookie year at quarterback is not the worst thing for anybody, even for a guy that you take 10th overall in the NFL draft, and that's where Patrick Mahomes was taken. That's why, because I was curious. I was like, how is that? Like, nobody's been better than that. But then you go look back, and Mahomes played one game his rookie year. Breeze played one game his rookie year. Peyton Manning, the Colts went like 3-13 Peyton Manning's rookie year. Of course, we know Tom Brady's story. Lamar Jackson wasn't.
He got the one start at the end, right?
Who?
Lamar Jackson.
Maybe.
I think
I didn't actually look at his pro football page, but I know that he wasn't immediately a starter.
I'm almost positive he started the last game of his rookie season.
Well, then let's take a look at year 2018. Let's see. It looks like he started for the second half of his rookie season. Week 10.
Right. Okay.
Excuse me, week 11, he was 13 of 19 and then had more than that passing attempts every single game after that. So my point being is that it's not often that a rookie gets to go and play for a competent football team and also be the starter and also be good. It just doesn't happen all that often, and some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now weren't handed the starting job the second they were drafted, essentially.
Right. That was the Ravens team when Harbaugh was about to get fired until they made the switch. That's what that was. And then they got really good all of a sudden when he came in. That's that. Yeah.
So now so Peterson, Doug Peterson over there, he's calling Harbaugh's like, so this is something I should try. This is something I should try. Just give the ball to Jalen Hurts, see what works. I also want to mention real quick before we go to break. Creighton was 13 of 23 from beyond the arc. It's almost like they look really awesome when they shoot it well, and they look very beatable when they don't. Marquette I wrote about Marquette yesterday at 110sportsmedia.com. I still like Marquette, but it's the dangers of Marquette goes from a middle of the pack Big East team to potentially being a top 3 or 4 Big East team based on how good Justin Lewis and Dawson Garcia are, and that's just a dangerous game to play in the Big East, is depending on freshmen like that to raise your ceiling like that. They weren't very good. Kobe McEwen didn't have a great game. They lose to Seton Hall. I still like them, but wanted to throw those two things in there as well. We got a college football playoff scenario game to play next. We'll do that. I'm going to throw scenarios at Josh. He's going to respond accordingly. We'll do that next. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.